open that page, I'll search for my fix, find what I need in the deep dark abyss.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Deidre Cunningham and Sarah Hudson on questions that legal defense lawyers want to know from data scientists and data and algorithmic auditors like ourselves. Jake, can you tee us up?
Sure. And yeah, thanks both of you for coming back. I'm excited to continue this conversation. Last episode, we planned to address at least 2 questions. We made it through 1. This episode, we plan to address at least 1 question, and we might do better than that. But we're going to start with the question we did not make it to last time, which is, what does good look like? So let me just zoom out a little bit. Deidre and Sarah are coming to us from Washington Defenders Association, public defense lawyers in the state of Washington. They're asking us questions that their membership want to know about use of AI in courtrooms. And so what does good look like relates to that. What does good look like? Let me read it actually from the questions. What does a responsible, well-informed approach to AI actually look like for a small legal organization, just a group of lawyers trying to do right by their clients?
And, before we answer this, I'd love to hear you guys talk a little bit about how you came to this question. What do you, are the contours of this question, and also what you guys are doing here. I mean, one of the things that I find inspiring about your story, and the reason we are here today, is because you guys are doing your best already. So tell us how that question came up, what you think the answer might be too.
You want to go first, Sarah? Okay.
So for me, and for a lot of people who are similarly situated, what good looks like has to fit into all the other good, because there are so many competing interests and competing things you have to think about in any sort of case. And you have to weigh what those are. And sometimes you can't do best across the spectrum. We would all like to, but there's just a finite amount of time across people you represent. And so really trying to figure out what good looks like, because we don't ever want to do bad. We want to do good or even best, but sometimes you just can't get there. And so knowing what good looks like helps people shape their expectations, and would help me shape my own expectations about what that looks like and how I can be effective and to help people and not do any harm.
Yeah. I was thinking when you said the contours, Kathy, I was thinking about we have a real diversity of practice in our state. So we have people who are in pretty substantial offices, organized with supervisors and tech support and paralegals and investigators. But we also have members who are practicing in places where they're a solo practitioner and they may have a support staff, like 1 person, maybe 2 people helping them out, but they're managing similar cases in the complexity and the amount of work that they have to get done, but they're not doing it in the same structure or with the same support. And so I also think knowing what good looks like helps folks hit their targets or surpass targets. Because especially when you're on your own or you have fewer people practicing around you, you may not see it modeled around you. I'm not accusing anybody of not doing their best. I'm sort of saying, we can all imagine it's a lot easier to learn things and perform at a higher level when you are surrounded by other people doing that work with you. And when you're on your own, you really do need to have some of these benchmarks to know that you're hitting them because you're really responsible and you may not have that opportunity to work with other people or be mentored by other people. So I think that's why I'm interested in the question. Is that good for contours? Or?
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's a great start. And I'm going to just keep asking questions too, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Last time when we talked about data, because most of our clients are lawyers or law firms. And so we're very used to thinking through discovery and how to ask the right questions of a company's practices through discovery. And it's an involved months long, maybe years long thing that, we ask for this data and then we get it and then we analyze it. Then we give them information and then they ask more questions and it's lots of back and forth. I'm imagining that is probably not something that you guys typically have the time to do. So I just want to confirm that because that's what we're so used to.
There's a diversity. I would say, yes, you're right that generally civil practitioners and people who don't have folks waiting to get out of jail are on a different timeline.
Yeah.
But also, there's a variety. So we do have highly complex cases that take years in a lot of different practice areas. Some of them have to do with criminal charges and some of them are about families and others are people are facing indefinite detention. So there are folks that have more time than I would say like a misdemeanor defense attorney whose timeline is 30 days or short timeline, shorter than years, right? But there are people who might have more time and also then get more discovery, right? So the complexity increases the amount of increases the likelihood you're going to have maybe see AI or have a large amount of discovery to manage or have some of these issues come up. So it doesn't always work like that, but yeah.
But okay, so like going on the other end of the spectrum, we discussed briefly last time, like the notion that some of your clients are being scored by recidivism risk algorithms or the like, or other kinds of risk algorithms. And to your point, like of you guys like typically overloaded with cases and also don't have that much time, and also would benefit from sharing information with others who are also interested in these questions. Like it kind of reminds me, Jake, I don't know if you agree, but it kind of reminds me of like this thing called a model card. And I'm just trying to imagine like a new kind of model card, but made for folks like you. So a model card is, and we're not experts on model cards, but we've come across them in some of our AI work, which is, it's a description of what a model consists of, like where the data came from, what the model's goal is, how the data was trained, the risks of the data, like whether fairness testing was done on it and what were the results. And it's supposed to be like a very concise, readable, understandable, accessible, like holistic view of, how did this come to be and what are its goals? It strikes me that some of those questions that I just said a model card is supposed to answer would be interesting to defense lawyers, if there was a model card on recidivism risk algorithms. But then you guys would have more questions which you'd want answered. So I was wondering if maybe like, and not to give you work. I don't want to give you work, but like, but I'm wondering like, building on the notion of like, what would be sort of minimal viable product for defense lawyers to be like able to share. Here's this. Oh, your client is being scored by this model. Okay. Here's the defense lawyer's model card for this model. And here's what we know about it. And this is like a document that like defense lawyers maintain and use as like a shortcut to understanding what the situation, or maybe you guys already have that information at your fingertips. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is an idea I've just come up with as we're talking.
Yeah, I think as an idea, I think that would be helpful. I don't know that something like that exists across all of the models that we're seeing, at least not in our state.
How many models are you seeing?
I mean, the jurisdiction, how many contracts do you think the jurisdictions have to use different tools? Because that's kind of what's happening, right? Folks are encountering things. Some jurisdictions are using similar tools. Some of them are using similar vendors. Some of them are using their own vendors. So I think that there's definitely a diversity going on across our state. And I've never heard, at least maybe Sarah might know this, I have not heard of such a broad, like a model card for all of those tools that might be in use.
A whole list. And when you were talking about the solo practitioner, lawyer who is wearing many hats and handling every aspect of many clients' cases, I was thinking about not just that they would encounter AI being used on the other side, like that they have to challenge, but that they may want to use AI to make it through the incredible stack of work that they have.
Certainly.
So
that's true too.
Drafting off of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it could be useful. I don't know how. I do think it would be useful, and I would love something to have our questions answered for once. Though I have no doubts that it would not stay secret, right? Like, I feel like anytime we're relying on information and then we're using it in court, we're most likely going to end up having to share it with someone. The other side, the court, but I'm not sure that's wrong in this situation. I don't know that would be harmful. I can imagine the court definitely needs to know. A lot of the information that you're suggesting would be on these cards. And so, but the idea of maybe they answer questions we have as opposed to relying on the vendor to tell us what they'd like us to know. We could like have cards that answer the questions we need answers to. I like that idea.
Yeah. I mean, sorry to interrupt, but like,
no worries.
A lot of the, here's the kind of information that I would imagine would be useful to you. Just going to the recidivism risk algorithms again, like they are called risk scores or reoffense scores or something like that. They are actually predicting arrest, like they're, knowing a little bit more, like behind what's behind this, name they've given it. It's almost like the name is supposed to answer the technical questions, but it doesn't, right?
Right.
So knowing some of these scores, I actually wrote I think an amicus letter to a court to try to get somebody out of prison after he'd been in prison for like 40 years or something, and he was like sick and dying. And like one of the things I was complaining about, because he was up for parole, but he was just not given parole, was that the scoring system they used to deny him parole never took into account how long it had been since he committed the crime, which he committed when he was a young man. So there was just like, it blew me away that this, and not only that, but it was, that model was trained in the 1950s on some kind of like small inmate population in one state. It had never been reviewed or revised. There's so much information about the model, which I ended up being able to use in my letter to argue that he should be released. And it was, it was way more like, it was good information. I do think the court should know this stuff. I think the other side should know this stuff, right?
Exactly.
I think everyone should know this stuff so that everyone realizes this very flimsy. It's very, very flimsy indeed. Even though being given a score somehow makes it seem really official and objective.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
I think that's the point. Like, I think the point is to make it seem official and objective when it can't possibly be those things, because humans made it and humans are not perfect and they're certainly not objective all the time. I mean, like, I think that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to give people a sense of confidence in a system or a way of doing things that maybe shouldn't have your confidence.
100%. Yeah.
I mean, come to think of it, the questions I just outlined, like, does somebody get credit on their score for 40 years of perfect behavior? Like, is an important question, right? So one of the things to answer your original question is like, what is good enough? I feel like, well, you have different categories of interaction with data stuff, right? And one of them is this question of interacting with these scoring systems that are scoring your clients. And a set of really good questions to be asking about these tools would be a very good start. And one of them would be, has there been fairness testing and what does it look like? The answer is almost always no. But another one would be like, is the questionnaire, the original questionnaire, available? How was it trained? When was it made? When was it revised last? Does it give credit for 40 years of good behavior in prison? That, those are very basic questions, but I feel like, going to your point, Sarah, that if you're a defense lawyer, very busy, do you have a list of 10 things you know how to do? And that might help. You might just ignore like these questions because you just don't know what to ask. So a list of questions to ask of any such tool might be a good start. What do you guys think?
Yes, that sounds amazing. And to Jake's point, I think there are questions we would want to interrogate before using the tools ourselves, right? So that same solo lawyer wanting to know if they can use other types of tools that aren't just showing up in court, but like to help them be more efficient. Yeah. They definitely would love to have. We tried to give our inexpert guidance on questions that it was not that inexpert. I shouldn't say that. We came up with some questions for folks because we really feel like knowing how to ask the questions and knowing how to assess something is how to get started. But yes, I think that's exactly
right.
You
gave your members questions to ask about the AI tools that they were considering using?
Might want to use, yes.
Oh, I want to hear. I want to hear the advice. Yeah.
Well, we used, one of them was the SAFE method. Sarah, do you want to tell them? Yes.
I don't remember it off the top of my head. I can find it though.
Yeah. So we had two sets. Let me describe the questions we had. We had two sets of questions. One of them was, there are these tools out in the marketplace. They're telling lawyers to use them. How do you know if you really should be using them? So we had a set of questions around how to evaluate those tools, what the steps might be if you really think you want to use those tools, steps of how to interact with vendors, if you're going to get an agreement, what should be in your agreement, and those types of things as far as the contract around confidentiality. We had a separate set of questions that had to do with whether you could actually use them. So you could evaluate what's out in the marketplace, like this product is on the shelf, and say, okay, that's the safest one to use, but I'd have to do these things to make sure. That doesn't mean you actually can use it in your practice. That doesn't mean like there's the categories of data you want to put in there are categories of data you're allowed to put into a tool.
I see.
So we had a separate set of questions for people to evaluate.
Question.
The privacy questions, like where did this data come from? Your client's confidences cannot go into these tools. Like they probably can't without informed consent, even if it's confidential on the other end. And that's still an open question. But even if it's informed consent, that's what the rule says. So anyway, so there's a separate set of questions about, even if you find out which tools you might want to use, there's still like certain types of information that has to be treated differently because of where it came from.
That kind of reminds me of like the way ed tech vendors are constantly pushing all these tools around education to both teachers and principals and school systems. But actually there's a law that's like, you just can't willy-nilly use student data in these ways that like slurped up by these third-party vendors, which is what happens, you know?
There's like state and federal laws. Educational privacy laws are real. And we have the same thing. Like we have medical record privacy. The things the state gives us is technically discovery is also, we have like state laws about that and what information, how it's supposed to be handled. And anyway, that would be the weeds.
I just want to say from your description of these questions that you supplied your members with first of all, just sounds wonderful. And it goes along the lines of the answer I was thinking to your all's question, what does good look like? In our algorithmic audit work, we always start audits with the notion of a use case. We don't audit algorithms in a vacuum. We don't audit algorithms as lines of code. We audit them as tools that are being used in a particular way with particular people in a certain geographic place that has laws, right? So we take into account how it's being used and the context where it's being used. And when I think of your solo practitioner who's, having all these tools shoved at them, many of those tools are probably very general purpose, like, throw any old deposition in here. We'll help you find the meaty stuff, right? Like they're claiming to be able to do tons of different things, from summarize to find what's interesting in this long document, help with discovery. The very first thing we would do as auditors is say, let's talk about some specific use cases here and get from a general purpose tool, which you're not going to give a thumbs up or thumbs down on, like lawyers using ChatGPT, good idea or bad. That's just like, that's not a sharp enough question. Like, let's get to some specific use cases.
Bad is the answer.
But it's like,
Yes.
I mean,
but not a sharp enough question. Agreed.
yeah. And
Oh, okay, but I'm going to push back. There probably are perfectly good questions that a lawyer could ask ChatGPT without exposing confidential information, and then they would obviously have to check every single line that ChatGPT gave back to it, right? Or are you saying no, like never?
Well, I'm going to let Sarah give her.
Sarah?
I think there is a middle ground for this. I would use it maybe if I was trying to generate images for a client, or like there are other places to use generative AI in practice. There are lots of things that I might not ask for it to be reliable, right? But I might ask it to rewrite something to explain to a client. Like I might say, okay, explain it to, or rewrite this in a way that is more appropriate for someone who has a high school education. Because my writing probably doesn't always encompass that, or help me explain this in a different way. Help me explain this to someone with this sort of life experience. And that doesn't reveal really any client information, but might help me relate to my clients in a different way and help them understand information differently.
And you'd never do that without reading it over before handing it over. So, yeah, I mean, all I'm saying is that
I would just say that people should read their ethics rules.
I'm not I'm not giving advice to lawyers right now.
I'm just saying, like, there's different rules though. And sometimes you're working in a practice area where you're actually not allowed to discuss anything related to the representation. So it just depends. I would say information gained in your representation, you just can't share it. So, and if you read that literally, everybody reads these rules differently. So if you read it literally, you're not putting anything in ChatGPT. But if you think you can couch it in a hypothetical enough scenario to use it in a way that's useful,
yeah,
then maybe you can. And also, if you get informed consent for some of the stuff, it's okay. It's the issue if people are not necessarily saying to their client, hey, I want to run some of your data through this tool
oh, God,
on the internet.
Sounds like a nightmare. That sounds like a nightmare.
Is it a nightmare? Like if you're trying to do something that's helping the case, I'm just saying, listen, I'm saying no, but maybe. And then I'm saying read the things, read the rules and see. But don't forget that you might want to just talk to your client about it and see because if it's that important and it really would help. Like, I mean,
one of the things that we come back to a lot on this podcast, and actually on, coming up or next week, we're going to be having someone talk about this as well, is just how much a bad legal advice is happening on Gen AI and how it's mucking up the courts themselves. Because a bunch of people think that they can represent themselves because they have ChatGPT, and they're wrong. So in other words, it's like, it's a problem even beyond what you're just describing as against the ethics rules. It's a problem because these companies are representing that you're getting reasonable legal advice coming from these Gen AI. That's already a problem. Yes. That's a separate, and there's a tension there because people do need to be able to represent themselves in court. And so it's really difficult that these tools are not that great at being accurate and giving correct case citations or not making things up. Because some folks really need to be able to self-advocate. But then I was really solely thinking of the scenario where if a lawyer has access to information and then wants to put it in the tool to do the next thing.
So that's the idea Kathy gave earlier, right? The model parts idea, right? The conversation that you are having is perfect. It needs to be had among the defense lawyers to say, hey, I was thinking of using it to, as Sarah suggested, like just rephrase this concept in terms that my client might understand better. My first thought was, oh, that seems smart. But then it's like, oh, you raise a good point. Maybe even bringing in the little bit of detail that you would need in that prompt is actually not good for ethics. What you're doing in algorithmic auditor terms is you're describing a use case and you're going through who the stakeholders are. One of the stakeholders is your client. You're a stakeholder since you have limited time and you're trying to serve lots of clients.
Yeah.
So our auditing method thinks about who are the stakeholders and what are their concerns with this use case. And your membership is, you really represent a wide range of what the attorneys' needs and concerns are as far as that use case. So I'm like just fantasizing that your membership can really develop a notion of use cases where it's really helpful for me. It's saving me time. It's letting me serve my client better. Is there some risk that we're, going out of ethics lines? If so, like, let's identify where those lines are. Let's bring that into the ethical matrix is the name of the framework we use to keep track of stakeholders and their concerns around a certain use case. But I think it's undeniable that your members are encountering these tools. They're being asked to or tempted to use them. And the question is, like, are they going to do it with their eyes open, or they're just going to try something? Like, I thought of that solo practitioner. It's so lonely. I've spent a little time coding with Claude when it's like it's just a data project I'm working on. And it's first of all lonely. And second of all, you get trapped in this conversation with Claude. And pretty soon you're like, oh, Claude has offered to do X, Y, and Z. Like, you need to check in with the other people to say, no, you know what? Like, stay within scope here. Like, you didn't ask it to do these extra things, right? You
Right.
constantly
100%.
checking back in with the other attorneys who are working through the same questions is really important, I think, to avoid getting drawn into using it more deeply or relying on it more than you intended to. So I submit that this idea that your members can share with each other, like, how am I using it? How's it working? What am I worried about? Have you been worried about this too? Like, what are you not putting into the prompts specifically so that we can all obey that? Like, work out the
100%.
guidelines together.
Yeah. That does sound like a good idea.
I just want to step back because we only have a few minutes left, and I think we've done a really reasonable job in two directions, but I think there might be more than two directions. So I just want to, even if we're not going to be able to finish even one question in this podcast, maybe we can at least acknowledge what we're missing, So we've talked about model card-ish things where you have a series of questions to ask about a scoring system like a recidivism risk algorithm or other kinds of AI that your client has come across. Okay, so that's one thing. And then another thing is tools that defense lawyers want to use. How do you do that safely and well, and that preserves, their clients' privacy rights and other rights? Is there another category that you, as defense lawyers, come across, like your interactions with AI?
Yes. So I think one other way, it's a little more macro, is in sort of the politics surrounding public defense, which is a constant tension between, I'll call them resources, but much of that is money and funding, and also physically having the people who have the expertise to help defend people well and bring forward their advocacy in court. And that tension requires dashboarding, data collection. Okay. So there's this other back here away from the individual client case, this sort of macro or systemic level use that might need to be happening, or some way of collecting an aggregate information that then helps the role of that office, the ability of those lawyers to do contracts, the ability of people to staff and survive budget crises, and all those things that people doing casework are not thinking about because they have to get their work done, but that also needs to happen for them to exist. I hope that makes sense. It has to happen because otherwise, funding doesn't happen, and then people are not getting paid, and then those lawyers don't exist in real life for a client to have. And so,
right.
Yeah. So there's this other layer.
Am I understanding you're talking about collecting the information that is required to fundraise for this kind of work?
Fundraise or to report back to government funders. And so because we have a diversity of who does the work, that looks different, but it almost always involves data collection, case management systems that then do that data collection, that uses these tools to collect the data in aggregate and then somehow make reports about the work. And it would be great. And, we just changed our caseload system or our caseload standards. And so in some future date, people are going to want to know if that's helping.
Right.
We did this great thing. Did it help?
Right.
We should be able to answer that question in theory, but the detail of that involves these tools. And
when you
data
say
collection.
tools, you mean like the case management
computer-based tools
yeah.
that take data and then purport to say something about the data, and also to allow folks to make not predictions the way we were talking about them with the algorithm, but to be able to make statements about, we think there's a qualitative difference because of these changes in caseloads.
Yeah.
So how do we show that? Yeah.
Yeah. That is actually kind of closer to the work that Jake and I actually do. Like writing up, like doing analysis of like data over time, seeing how trends and trying to identify causal things, which is always hard. But if you say, then we were going along and here suddenly something changed and maybe our caseload changed and this is our success rate went up, and there's no other reason that our success rate would have gone up besides the caseloads going down or whatever. I'm just imagining the best scenario. But yes, I will say though that that isn't necessarily AI at all, right? That might just be old fashioned analysis and report writing.
Exactly. Yeah. But the way that product is packaged, it's packaged from vendors in similar, that doesn't always just come with the data collection, right? It might come with other things.
It reminds me of when we see an ed tech tool where they're like, look, it's a grade book and it's attendance book and everything. And they're like, by the way, we can also predict who's going to go to what college and when exactly they're going to graduate and how many years. They throw on this stuff that you never asked for that's like, we'll show you trends that you never even imagined. So I could totally see that happening in case management software too.
Yeah.
But, my hunch on hearing it was AI would probably be good at scraping websites for here's briefs that were filed. You have to check on every county's courts or something. There's some manual work of scraping that could be automated, but then you need thoughtful people to ask a good question this county changed its intake process on this date. So did the caseloads go down after that or not? You need experts to think of smart questions and come up with good ways to answer them. But you could probably help gather the data. Maybe there are questions about if you've had AI scrape a bunch of court data, is it anonymous enough to be aggregating together and then using for this analysis? People should be part of that question. But my auditor mind goes right to just chewing through that question. Yes, let's automate the boring data collection parts and have people like yourselves think hard about what are the right questions that you really want on that. What are the right dials on that dashboard? We are very much in the world of making those kinds of cockpits, we call them.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I feel like it's time to stop, but I'm not sure we even answered one question this time.
I don't know. But it was a great conversation.
Yeah, as always.
But
I do think that that you guys you've got the right idea with the questions to ask about the lawyerly use of AI. I would say, whether it's possible to have that. I don't even know if that's a living document because it probably changes pretty frequently. But at the same time, having requests for the vendors, ultimately our goal is always to get the vendors themselves to do a better job of addressing these questions before they try to sell you flawed products. So maybe a slightly coordinated effort of telling the vendors, we're not going to be using your tools unless they comply with these standards might be a kind of goal for that set of questions. And again, another list of questions for for these scoring systems, which I do think we could start today. We could start today writing down such questions. But the thing about it is, I feel like lawyers, I'll just say this on behalf of like my love for lawyers and for journalists, that like both groups of people I've run into were initially like wowed by big data and now AI, but have learned quite quickly that with the right mindset, you just ask the same question of this technology, as you would anything that's claiming to know everything. Like it's claiming to be some kind of oracle. And you're like, why would I believe that? Like, I don't believe like a particular court system is perfect. Why would I believe that, this tool is perfect? And so just put on your lawyerly cap and be skeptical, or put on your journalist cap and be skeptical and be like, what's the evidence? That's always what it comes down to, is like, what's the evidence that this is working? Like, I need to know how this is believable. There has to be some kind of more evidence than you're showing me, because you're just asking me to believe you. That's always a red flag.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time. And you know what? We're going to answer more of your questions.
We're going to get to it. We're going to answer a question.
I know Sarah has to move like countries and stuff, but Sarah, we're going to have you back. Thank you guys so much for joining the AI Skeptics, and we'll see you soon.
Yep. Thank you.